So deep does national sentiment in favor of the rights of the Palestinians run that regardless of which party is in power, the Indian government has remained firmly committed to the cause of an independent, secure Palestine with East Jerusalem as its capital. India has excellent relations with Israel too, but that has not come in the way of the country taking a stand against Israel's violations of international law. Against this backdrop, it is not hard to understand why the videotaped remarks of the Indian Consul General in New York, celebrating the so-called Israel model, have proved so controversial. This is what the diplomat, Sandeep Chakravarty, who made it clear he was speaking in his official capacity, said at a small gathering of Kashmiri Pandits in New York recently.
I believe the security conditions in Jammu and Kashmir will improve. It will allow the refugees to go back, and in your lifetime you will be able to go back and you will be able to visit your villages, you will be able to go back to your home and you will find security, because we already have a model in the world. I don't know why we don't follow it. It has happened in the Middle East. You have to look at if the Israeli people can do it, we can also do it.
As you can imagine, these remarks caused consternation in India, of course, but also around the world. Perhaps as a form of damage control, the Ministry of External Affairs quickly released an advance copy of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's statement marking the International Day for Solidarity with the Palestinians, November 29th. Yet, the question remained, could it be that Modi's letter of support for the Palestinians was just public posture, and that what the senior Indian diplomat was caught saying on camera represented the real thinking of the Indian government? Or had the diplomat misspoken? Well, so far the MEA has not clarified matters, and Chakravarty's own claim that his remarks have been taken out of context is neither here nor there, since the unedited video recording of what he said is freely available on the internet, and the contents are pretty damning in any possible context, especially when he says Indian culture is Kashmiri culture, is Hindu culture, and those sorts of comments. In this episode of Beyond the Headlines, I'm going to leave the question of where the Modi government stands for another day, and instead answer in 10 simple points a question that is far more important because it is the subject of so much ignorance and disinformation around the world, which is, what exactly is this Israel model that India apparently needs to follow? Don't try this at home. That's the warning TV channels put out before they broadcast an act or feat that is especially dangerous. And I'm afraid my explanation of the Israel model also carries the same statutory warning, especially for India. So let's plunge in with point number 1, the starting point of the Israel model. First, occupy the sovereign territory of others and turn them into refugees. The United Nations created Israel and Palestine on November the 29th, 1948 as two equal sovereign states. Today, Israel is in occupation of Palestine. It has annexed East Jerusalem. It has blockaded the Gaza Strip and filled the West Bank with its own outposts of settlers and refuses to abide by the terms of either UN resolutions or negotiated accords that it has signed to end this illegal occupation of Palestinian land. As part of this occupation, by the way, Israel steals the aquifers and water resources of the Palestinians too, and will not allow the refugees who were forcibly driven from their homes to return to their own land. The second feature of the Israel model is to impose collective punishment on the occupied people. When the occupied people exercise their inalienable and legitimate right to resist, the Israel model involves subjecting the entire civilian population of the Palestinian territories to collective punishment using such methods as a territorial blockade or travel restrictions that can turn even the shortest of journeys into a nightmare lasting hours, the demolition of homes, mass arrests and detentions, the use of civilians and even children as human shields. The third feature of the Israel model is the conversion of occupied territory into your own land. First, by building illegal settlements, then a massive apartheid wall to protect the occupiers from the occupied, then roads to connect your illegal settlements. Israel has grabbed so much land already that the West Bank resembles a piece of Swiss cheese, full of holes. Fourth, The Israel model involves not just robbing the Palestinians of their land, but also turning a section of Israel's own citizens, especially those who are Palestinian, into second-class citizens. Reactionary politicians like Benjamin Netanyahu regularly speak of Arab Israelis and their representatives as if they are national enemies of some kind. Arabs are 1/5 of Israel's population, yet suffer from discrimination when it comes to the right to lease land, to reunite their families, or the right to residency in Jerusalem. Fifth, the Israeli model requires that the judicial system, which is otherwise quite independent of the executive, serve as a rubber stamp for the illegal occupation and for the violation of Palestinian human rights by the Israeli security apparatus and military. Palestinians whose homes are taken over illegally have tried in vain to get the Israeli courts to intervene on the side of justice. Yet, judgment after judgment has confirmed what the Israeli human rights organization B'Tselem has said, that those under occupation cannot seek justice in the occupier's courts. The sixth element of the Israel model is to regularly attack your neighbours, especially Lebanon, and to breed violence and insecurity in all your neighbouring countries. Israel has formally annexed the Golan Heights from Syria and for years had turned southern Lebanon into a hellhole. It is impossible to think of the Israel model without its seventh element, the violation of international humanitarian law whenever the Israeli Defense Forces wage war or aggression. Even if we leave aside aggression as a war crime by itself, the actual conduct of military operations by the IDF, especially in Gaza and in southern Lebanon, has involved war crimes such as the disproportionate and indiscriminate use of force and the killing and maiming of civilians. All of this has been well documented by international human rights agencies and also, of course, the United Nations. An integral part of the Israel model is also the demonization of critics as terrorists or terror sympathizers. Reactionary Israeli politicians and officials are also quick to label the critics of Israeli policies towards the Palestinians as anti-Semitic, or if the critics are Jews or Israelis, as unpatriotic and anti-national. The ninth element of the Israel model is the regrettable tendency of some politicians to dishonor the memory of the victims of the Nazi Holocaust by invoking their suffering to somehow justify what the Israeli state is doing to the Palestinian people. Using the suffering of one people to justify committing crimes against others is one of the most atrocious things a politician can do, and yet, sadly, this has now become a tactic that is frequently resorted to. The 10th element of the Israel model is one which has come into starker relief these days, given Benjamin Netanyahu's failure to form a coalition government in the face of the challenge from Benny Gantz in the September 2019 election to the Knesset. Israel's generals managed to stymie Netanyahu's plans to bomb Gaza just before those elections, but as Israel prepares for a third election early next year, Gaza has emerged as a convenient punching bag. Over 30 Palestinian civilians were killed in Israeli bombings in Gaza this month, and the fear is that there will be more aggression as Netanyahu seeks to push a reluctant electorate into giving him a majority. So there, in a nutshell, is the Israel model in 10 atrocious parts. I cannot think of a single redeeming feature of this model. It is a curse for the people of Palestine, of course, but it is also a curse for the people of Israel, who are condemned by this model to live lives of perpetual insecurity. Anyone who thinks Israel can serve as a guide for India is either ignorant or mad.